Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the 40/40 Vision podcast, the ultimate sports history pod where hindsight is 40/40. We're so excited to jump into today's episode, but before we do, here's a quick word from one of our sponsors. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 40/40 Vision podcast. I'm your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Sulman Haque. What's up, man? How are you?
Yo, what's going on, man? I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm good. So on today's episode, we are doing another half-decade team for the NFL. So our last episode we did from the year 2000 to the year 2004, and because we already did a 90s all-decade team, we went a little further back in time, and we are doing another half-decade team from 1985 to 1989. So if you remember the format from the last episode, Sulman and I will be building out essentially a fantasy team similar to the NFL's all-decade teams, where we'll be doing a quarterback, two wide receivers, a running back, a tight end, a flex, two offensive linemen, two defensive linemen, two linebackers, two corners, and a safety. So last time, Sulman had first pick for all the positions. So if you remember, he definitely had a better team last time. But this time around, I get first dibs on every position just to keep things fair. So we're going to go back and forth, and we will go ahead, and I'll start with Sulman. I'll go ahead and start with your quarterback for the, once again, the NFL half-decade team of guys drafted from 1985 to 1989. So go ahead, buddy.
I didn't love my quarterback pick. I debated a couple of guys here. I debated Troy Aikman, Vinny Testaverde, and Rich Gannon was in the mix for me here. But I ultimately went Troy Aikman. You know, he has a lot of that career accolades that, make him worthy of the selection here. He was drafted in 1989. He was pick one in round one by the Cowboys. He's a 6-time Pro Bowl selection, 3-time Super Bowl champion, 1-time Super Bowl MVP. He's a 1-time Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year award winner. He ranked 75th in career passing yards and 78 in career touchdown passes. And he is a Hall of Famer, surprisingly. If you look at the numbers, Vinny Testaverde has better numbers than him across the board, but Troy Aikman has the 3 Super Bowls, so had to go with the 3-time Super Bowl champion, though you could probably say he was carried by, all those legendary Cowboys he had alongside him. But that's my pick there, Khaled.
I know you said it's surprising that he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think it's a surprise at all. The 3 Super Bowls is really all you need to know.
Yeah, the 3 Super Bowls. But I guess it's more surprising that how much of a factor the Super Bowls are in the Hall of Fame conversation, because Vinny Testaverde, better numbers, he's not sure. Even considered for the Hall of Fame.
The reason I think it is such a big factor is because the way I see the Hall of Fame is it's telling the story of the NFL, right, through the decades. So even if you were not the best statistical quarterback of your era, even if you weren't the best, in a maybe top 5 quarterback of your era, there's probably 5 quarterbacks from the 80s you can name that were statistically better than, or from the 80s and 90s, that were statistically better than Troy Aikman, but he won 3 Super Bowls. Super Bowl MVP matters. Super Bowls matter. Winning matters. So all that stuff matters because you can't tell the story of the NFL in the 90s, especially without Troy Aikman. So it makes sense that he was the MVP, or is already elected to the Hall of Fame, right?
Yep. Yeah. That's a fair point.
So my pick, I thought I was bold. And so, Mom, when you texted me telling me that you were considering Vinny Testaverde over Troy Aikman, I was like, no. And I know our buddy Ronnie Branch, who, from Gridiron Goons on Facebook, is going to listen to this, and he might, throw his phone against the wall or crash his car or something like that for hearing this. He's a big Cowboys fan. He got really upset that we debated Jason Witten's Hall of Fame credentials last time. So shout out Ronnie for listening. He might appreciate this. I don't know. But obviously I got first pick in my quarterbacks, and the guy I picked was Randall Cunningham. And you know what? He's a dude that I think was obviously ahead of his time because he was a running quarterback and a super athletic quarterback in a time where that wasn't really a trait that teams looked for. They were still stuck on this, 6'5", 6'4", statuesque quarterback that's going to stay in the pocket and make the reads and do all that. Very much the pocket passer mold. It's not like Randall Cunningham was a small dude, but he was definitely ahead of his time in the sense that he was super athletic. And the reason I went with Randall Cunningham over Troy Aikman is I think just he was a better quarterback. So in terms of career accolades, obviously he doesn't stack up as much, Aikman in terms of team success, but he's still a four-time Pro Bowler, three-time All-Pro. He was MVP runner-up 3 times. He was Offensive Player of the runner-up twice. He's on the NFL 1990s All-Decade team, and he is second all-time in rushing yards by a quarterback and third all-time with rushing touchdowns by a quarterback. And I think another thing that I did was I went back and I compared the two between Cunningham and Aikman, and I found that Cunningham has 3,000 fewer passing yards on 400 fewer attempts, so he's not as prolific as a passer, but he has 4,000 more rushing yards. So he's making up for it in another way. And he has 42 more passing touchdowns, 24 more rushing touchdowns, similar quarterback rating, 6 fewer interceptions than Troy Aikman. And what I loved about Cunningham is that he had 2 phases to his career. He had that great time with the Eagles. He retires for a year. He comes back to the Vikings in a backup role, and he ends up within a missed 38-yard field goal from going to the Super Bowl with Minnesota. I believe it was 1999, was it? I forget exactly the year. But
yeah, I think 99 was the year because Randy Moss was on the team at that point. And I think Moss
that's right.
In 98, yeah.
And I mean, it's no guarantee they win the Super Bowl that year, but he would have been a Super Bowl quarterback, which obviously would have helped his case. And obviously, if they win the Super Bowl, that's an even better argument in his favor. So I think in general, he's just a better quarterback than Troy Aikman. And you put him on those Cowboys teams, and they're still winning those Super Bowls, and he's looking, even better doing it. What do you think?
100%. I agree with you. I would have loved to have taken Randall Cunningham. I was like, I hope Khaled goes Troy Aikman, and then he took Randall Cunningham. I was like, dang. He took the guy I wanted, but I took Troy Aikman. No, I mean, I think your boy Ronnie here will like my next few picks coming up. So we'll see.
For sure, I'll like some of my next few picks as well. So I'll pass it back to you, and just remember that even though Sulman is going first here on the pod, I had first pick on all of the positions, which you'll definitely see with the wide receiver position. So right back to you.
Yeah, so I just took Troy Aikman's running mate here with Michael Irvin, right? That was the next best wide receiver left on the board here for me. He was drafted in 1988, pick 11 by the Cowboys. He's a 5-time Pro Bowl selection, 3-time Super Bowl champion, 3-time All-Pro, 23rd in career receiving yards, 33rd in career receptions, 98 in career touchdowns, and he is a Hall of Famer as well. And so I was like, okay, I might as well get the other part of the, Cowboys fearsome trio here and take Michael Irvin, and that was partly because of the guys you took, but definitely I think he's the 3rd best wide receiver among the guys drafted in this era.
Great player, great nickname, the playmaker, great attitude, at least when you want a competitive nature. One of the NFL's all-time bad boys because of that era of the Cowboys and the we'll call them off-field recreational activities that they were involved in. If you haven't read, what's the book called? Jeff Pearlman's Boys Will Be Boys. Have you heard of that book? It talks about the 90s Cowboys. Have you read it by any chance?
I haven't read it, but I heard about it.
Okay, just make sure you read it. It's amazing. They were basically, they were just wilding off the field. And the fact that he was still able to produce at the level that he did, it's unfortunate that his career ended, let's say, somewhat prematurely because of the neck injuries. I think he could have had a longer, statistical prime. He retired when he was 33, maybe plays a couple more years and does pretty well. But yeah, not better than my guys, but I totally get the pick. Okay, so back over to me for my first wide receiver. This is the second biggest no-brainer in the history of no-brainers, or maybe the biggest no-brainer, and that is Jerry Rice. So he was drafted in the 16th overall by the 49ers in 1985, and we could spend 2 hours listing out his statistical accolades and resumes, but he's first all-time in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns by a mile. 1990s All-Decade Team and 1980s All-Decade Team, so All-Decade Team for 2 decades, which is very rare. 3-time Super Bowl champ, 10-time first-team All-Pro, 13-time Pro Bowler. He played for like 22 years, something insane like that. What I remember most about Jerry Rice, especially as a Raiders fan and a guy that was born in 1988, is I missed the first prime of his career from 1986 to 1990. And then he had like a second prime from 1992 to 1996, where he was basically all pro like every single year. And then I caught the tail end of his career where he was just out of this world for the Raiders. At 39, 40, and 41 years old, he put up 1,100 yards, 1,200 yards, and then 900 yards with the Raiders, which is just unheard of. There will never be another Jerry Rice. There will never be another guy like him. He is, sure, Tom Brady's the greatest winner in the history of the NFL, the greatest quarterback. But for me, the greatest player, hands down, bar none, is Jerry Rice. What do you think?
100% agree with you on that. Like there was no one better than Jerry Rice to come out and play in the league. He had such a long career. I would argue he had 3 primes, right? The last year's with the Raiders, that was still some prime football he was playing up in those late 30s. So, yeah, he's my favorite player of all time. Just love the guy. He had a great career on the Niners, had a great career when he finished with the Raiders. Obviously, he should have retired after the Raiders and not done all those things where he's like on the Broncos practice squad and the Seahawks. And he shouldn't have done all that. It would have been great if he just retired a Raider and called it a day. But Jerry Rice loved the game so much that he kept playing until he couldn't play anymore. And that's what makes him so great. And that's what made him so special. And that's why I agree with you. He's probably the best player of all time. And, Tom Brady won more rings and whatever and all that stuff. But just watching Jerry Rice, like how many guys can you say you watched play until their 40s and every year he was just killing it outside of when he had injuries?
None. Other than
exactly.
You can name maybe like 5. You name like Brett Favre, Tom Brady, Jerry Rice. That's it. That's a very, very short list. Maybe like George Blanda if you throw it in there, but that's a different era altogether. But the funny thing is, even that Seattle year, his numbers weren't awful. I'm looking at Football Reference right now. He played 11 games. He actually started 9 games for them at 42 years old. And he had in 11 games, it's nothing crazy, but he had 25 catches for 362 yards and
not
3
horrendous.
touchdowns.
Yeah. Not horrendous.
That's not bad, right? For a guy that, most of the prime wide receivers are 5 years into retirement at this point. And this guy's still trucking along. And then the Broncos practice thing, we can just forget about that. But I'm sure he enjoyed it. He looked weird in that jersey. I think he wore number 19 for them on the practice squad.
I don't even know, man. I don't even know. That's a version of Jerry Rice I forgot about. So
yeah, I don't know why that image sticks in my head. They probably didn't want to take number 80 from Rod Smith. So he's a good dude too. Didn't want to, throw his weight around when he was trying to make the team. So, like I said, we could talk for hours about Jerry Rice. Maybe we can do a Jerry Rice pod at some point. I know you're a big Niners fan. We can have a Sam on here too, and you guys can rant and rave about how great he is. But I'll pass it back to you for your second wide receiver.
So the second guy I took was Andre Reed. He was drafted in 1985 in round 4 with pick 86 by the Bills. He is a Hall of Famer as well. He's a 7-time Pro Bowl selection, 2-time All-Pro, 7th in career receptions, 14th in career receiving yards, 62nd in career touchdowns. And he was just part of those, early 90s Bills teams that kept making the Super Bowl and kept losing. But he had a really good career. I'm lucky that there was a 4th Hall of Fame wide receiver left here in this draft class. So there were some pretty good wide receivers, and I was lucky that he was also a Hall of Fame guy and he was still left on the board here. He's
definitely the 4th best in the group.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
You are lucky that there was 4 in this period. You had to, you didn't have to go down too far down the list. You got another Hall of Famer. My brother is a big Bills fan. I'm sure he'll appreciate that you took Andre Reed. Did you consider anybody else?
I thought it was pretty clear that Andre Reed was the 4th best guy in terms of wide receivers here. You took the top 2, and then I was like, it's pretty clear that Urban was 3rd. Probably you could make a case Urban was maybe 2 or tied with your guy who you took. And then Reed was clearly the 4th best guy on this list. There was it wasn't even a debate.
For sure. The guy I took, we keep referring to Reed as the 4th best. So I took Tim Brown. So one of the greatest Raiders of all time, one of the best receivers of all time. He was drafted 6th overall out of Notre Dame in 1988, again by the Raiders. Long list of accolades as well. 9-time Pro Bowler, 2 All-Pros. The thing is, with the All-Pros in this time is, I think there was 2 All-Pro teams. There was like the Pro Football Writers Association, and then the Sporting News had an All-Pro team too. So it was all mixed up when we were doing our research. Like some sites would say, oh, he's a 2-time All-Pro. Some sites would say 3, whatever. Few-time All-Pro, that's all that matters. All-decade team for the 1990s, Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's 7th all-time in receptions, 5th all-time in receiving yards, and 6th all-time in touchdowns. So he stacks up in terms of history. He played in a wide receiver era that was, pretty populated with a lot of these talented receivers: Jerry Rice, Michael Irvin, Andre Reed, Herman Moore, a couple other guys that were vying for those top positions. So the fact that he also had a really long career, he was similar to Jerry Rice in the fact that he had a couple primes, obviously drafted in 1988, but he was still good at the tail end of his career. He was named to the Pro Bowl in 2001 when he was 35. He was still having like 1,000-yard seasons in his mid to late 30s. And similar to Jerry Rice, he has a forgettable last year with another team. Do you remember him on the Buccaneers in 2004?
I totally do not remember that. I didn't even know he left I thought he was a Raider for life. I didn't even know he even tried to join another team.
Yeah, it was similar. There's always that one last year where the guys play 1 year too long, and it's just like, let's just see what we can do in our last year. But he was 38 at that point, so not quite Jerry Rice level, but still a really good receiver. And obviously already a Hall of Famer. So I think I definitely took the 2 best receivers. Maybe there's a case that Michael Irvin on any given week or year was better than Tim Brown, but obviously from a career perspective, you can't pass up Tim Brown for one of these other guys.
Yeah, I when I saw when I saw the board, I was like, oh, it's no brainer. Khaled's gonna go Jerry Rice, Tim Brown. Like, I don't even have to think about this. I got to start finding the guys after them.
For sure. All right, so we're moving on to our running backs. So go ahead and pick your running back.
My running back here was Thurman Thomas, who was taken in 1988 in round 2 by the Bills. And so I think he was the 40th selection overall. And then he was a 5-time Pro Bowl selection, 5-time All-Pro selection. He was won the NFL MVP award. He was the 2-time rushing yards leader. And for career, he's 14th in career rushing yards with over 12,000 yards. He's 22nd in career rushing touchdowns with 65. And he's 29th in career yards from scrimmage. So had a very good career. He's a Hall of Famer. Again, part of that early Bills 90s teams that went to the Super Bowl. One of the main reasons why they made it to the Super Bowl, him, Jim Kelly, Andre Reed, a pretty nice trio there. And so, yeah, I thought he was the second best running back here in this class. It was the running backs, as you will see, were not great. And I think there was clearly 2 guys you could only go with here in terms of running backs. And I'll pass it back to you to take the top guy here.
Yeah, and I was very kind to you. I will say that. Because
yes, I was lucky you didn't take him in the flex, because then I would have no running back.
I almost did, but I was like, all right, in the spirit of not trying to be a jerk, I left him for you. There's a couple other guys. Well, I guess just one other guy. That's Herschel Walker. Didn't have as great of a career as either of these guys, but he can make a case as your flex or something like that. But obviously the guy that Sulman is referring to, the one that I picked, was Barry Sanders. So one of the best running backs of all time. And the funny thing is, I'm sure you knew this, maybe you didn't, but these guys were college teammates, Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders on Oklahoma State in the mid to late 80s. Barry Sanders stayed a year. You did not know that? Okay, cool. Well, there you go. So I don't know. This has got to be a trivia question. Maybe there's a couple others, but this is probably the only college backfield that featured 2 Pro Football Hall of Famers at the same time.
Maybe I think so. I don't think I can't even think of any other. And we're too far off, like, to have any of these recent guys, but I can't think of any other combo that would be 2 Hall of Famers.
maybe like Miami in the 2000s, there was a case if like Clinton Portis had a better career or Willis McGahee or something. But there's a lot of college backfields that had some great running backs. But yeah, I don't think there's any that feature two Hall of Famers. So, but yeah, Barry Sanders, incredible running back. He's unfortunately retired early because the Lions were terrible, but he still put up insane numbers, 10-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro, 1990s All-Decade team. He's 4th all-time in rushing yards and 9th all-time in touchdowns as of this recording. So he probably could have broken both records, I think, but, he struggled being on a bad team. And the really fun conversation people have is what would the Cowboys have looked like with Barry Sanders back there, and what would the Lions have looked like, and what would their respective careers have looked like if him and Emmitt Smith traded places. So that's a fun conversation. A lot of people use it to shit on Emmitt Smith, but I won't do that.
Yeah. No, Barry Sanders, I think he's probably my favorite non-49er NFL player of all time. Love the guy, electric. I mean, it would have been nice to see him. I know there was rumors when he retired that, he may come back. He may play with the Raiders. He may play with the Niners. He may play with the Dolphins or something like that. It would have been nice to see him on a playoff team and seeing what he could have done. But I think he made the right choice, just retired early and avoided losing seasons with the Lions over there. So I think he did the right thing, but still electric.
The Lions, they robbed us of the end of Barry Sanders' career. They robbed us of the end of Megatron, Calvin Johnson's career. So there's a theme here. And he retired coming off basically a 1,500-yard season. So he was still
in his prime. Still in his prime.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he had like 1,800 yards from scrimmage. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but at least he's still walking around. He still looks good. Maybe he just wanted to focus on his health. So good for him. But yeah, I'll pass it to you for your tight end.
So the tight end I took here was Brent Jones. He was drafted actually in 1986 in round 5, pick 135 by the Steelers. I didn't know this, but when I was researching him a little bit, this came up that he was, even though he was drafted by them, he never played for them because he had a car accident that basically meant he couldn't play the entire season. And then the Steelers cut him, and then he joined the 49ers in 87, where he had a great career, 11-year career. He was a 3-time Pro Bowl selection, 3-time Super Bowl champ, 3-time All-Pro. He's 225th in career receptions, 347th in career receiving yards, 495th in career touchdown receptions. So pretty good numbers here for a tight end. And, he was just, I remember him as one of those tight ends that, that was the outlet, right, for Joe Montana, Steve Young, those guys. And he had really good seasons with the Niners. And so I took him here. Tight end pickings are pretty slim, and I appreciate you leaving him on the board here for me, Khaled.
I did. Out of the kindness of my heart, I thought, for a Niner fan. I liked him a lot growing up. It was really cool. I lived in Santa Clara, grew up in Santa Clara, and he went to Santa Clara University, which does not have a football program anymore. I think they cut it a few years after he left. So he's probably one of the last alumni from that school to make it to the NFL. And I just thought it was cool that he went to Santa Clara. Again, I left him for you, but the guy I took is not far off. And that is Jay Novacek. So he was drafted in 1988, round 6, pick 158 by the then St. Louis Cardinals. So this is before they actually had moved to Arizona, and he played there for 5 years before moving to the Cowboys, where that's where he really took off and became, one of the better tight ends in the NFL. He ended up being a 5-time Pro Bowler, 3-time Super Bowl champ, and all the other statistics are not that impressive. But I think the main thing is that he won 3 Super Bowls and was a member of those. He's one of the names that he's probably the 3rd, 4th name, maybe even 5th name that you mentioned. It's like Emmitt Smith, Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, Moose Johnson, I don't know, Larry Allen, and then Jay Novacek. But he was one of the weapons on those Super Bowl teams. So I couldn't let you pick him. You're a Niners fan. I wouldn't let you pick the Cowboys. The Cowboy.
Yeah, I'd have 3 Cowboys on my team. That would have been bad. Yeah, good pick. Solid pick.
Right. So go ahead, pick your flex.
Yeah. In terms of flex, I do appreciate you not taking Michael Irvin or Andre Reed in your flex positions, and then but my flex position, it was tough. I felt the flex was a little tough here this time around, but I went Andre Rison here. He was drafted in 1989, round 1, pick 22 by the Colts. He gave himself the nickname Spider-Man, and I think Chris Berman also used to call him Bad Moon Rising when he used to do the highlights there, so he had 2 nicknames. But surprisingly, he was a 5-time Pro Bowl selection, 4-time All-Pro, and 1-time Super Bowl champion. He's 84th in career receiving yards with just over 10,000, 91st in career receptions with just over 740, 89th in career touchdowns, and 84. He's played for a couple of different teams. He played for the Colts, Falcons, Browns, Jaguars, Packers, Chiefs, Raiders. And he's also very famously known for dating Left Eye Lopes, who burned his house down while setting his shoes on fire.
I was waiting for you to mention that.
that absolutely has to be mentioned when you talk about Andre Rison, that his house was set on fire. So we'll leave it with that. But I would say he had a pretty good career with the Falcons and Chiefs. That's where I really remember him, especially with the Chiefs. And he used to do that's where he got the Spider-Man nickname when he was on the Chiefs, and he had a pretty good career there. And he won the Super Bowl with the Packers in '96, which he didn't really contribute to, but he won the Super Bowl there.
Yeah, he was a bit part player there, but hey, they all count. And yeah, on the Raiders, he was actually nominated for Comeback Player of the Year, and he had a decent year with the Raiders in 2000 when Al Davis loved his old veterans trying to look for one last hurrah. But I love the nickname Andre Bad Moon Rising. It's so Chris Berman. It's so perfect. We could do a podcast on some of the
we should do a Chris Berman nickname podcast.
Yeah, like a top 10 ranking.
Yeah, for sure.
I think, what was the TJ Hushmanzada? He had one good one for him, but anyway, we digress. Yeah, I was very kind to you, and I didn't take. I was going to take Thurman Thomas or Michael Irvin. I was like, let me take a guy that's probably a little underappreciated in this era of the NFL. He's a little overlooked, probably because of how famous his brother has become, and that is Sterling Sharp. So obviously Shannon Sharp is one of the best tight ends of all time, and Sterling Sharp had the potential to be one of the best wide receivers of all time, but his career was cut pretty short by, I believe it was a neck or back injury. But in the 6 years that he played in the NFL, he had, he played 7 years in the NFL. He had 5 seasons of over 1,100 yards. He had 2 1,400-yard seasons. So he was dynamite. He was a 3-time first-team All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler. He led the NFL in receptions in 3 seasons, and was the receiving yards leader in 1992. I don't think he'll ever get into the Hall of Fame because of how short his career was, but he retired at age 29, coming off an 1,100-yard season and an 18-touchdown season. So again, the guy was dynamite, and he could have been, Brett Favre's best ever target. I think some of the other guys that he played with, Donald Driver, Greg Jennings, etc., maybe overtook Sterling Sharp. But if he had a longer career, he definitely could have been Brett Favre's like Marvin Harrison, Peyton Manning type connection. So do you remember much about him? Do you remember his career getting cut short?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember Sterling Sharp, like people were like, oh, he was super electric and he was really a really good receiver. And then his career just got cut short. But I definitely see it. Like he could have been one of the all-time great Packers and all-time great wide receivers in Packer history if he had been able to resume his playing career. I think he said 7 years. That's pretty short. So
yeah, just 7 years, but he retired coming off a Pro Bowl, coming off a 1,100-yard season again with 18 touchdowns. So it was unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it for our offensive skill position players. So we go ahead and move on to our offensive linemen. So I'll let you go ahead and pick your first offensive line.
This is really tough for me, Khaled, because I barely remember any of these offensive linemen. But I just went based on what I saw with the stats here. So my first offensive lineman, I went with Dermontti Dawson, who was selected in 1988 in round 2, pick 44 by the Steelers. He was a longtime Steeler. He was a 7-time Pro Bowl selection, 6-time All-Pro first team selection, and in 1993 he was named the Co-AFC Offensive Lineman of the Year by the NFLPA. And then in 1996, he was named the NFL Alumni's Offensive Lineman of the Year. I wasn't too familiar with him, but he apparently played 11 years for the Steelers and retired a Steeler. And people say he was one of the most dominant offensive linemen of the era. And so I thought he played center, I believe, and so he was a center. So I took him. He's a Hall of Famer as well. So I went with him.
I remember the name, but I don't remember much else.
I don't. Yeah, exactly. It's like I kind of remember the name, and that was about it. And I was like, okay, let me look up what else he did in his career. So that's who I went with.
All right. So the interior offensive lineman that I went with, a guy with a great name, and that's Randall McDaniel. He was drafted 19th overall in 1988 by the Vikings, and he just has one of the best resumes period for an offensive lineman, aside from the major team success that some of the other guys have had. But he was a 12-time Pro Bowler, 7-time All-Pro, 1990s All-Decade team. He's already in the Hall of Fame. And what I thought was really impressive about him was how incredibly durable he was. He didn't miss a game or a start for 12 years from 1990 to 2001. And he played obviously for the Vikings, but he also had a brief stint for 2 years with the Buccaneers, where he was still a Pro Bowl level player, but obviously not the All-Pro level. But he retired at age 37, playing 16 games. So it wasn't like he was forced to retire. I think he just chose to. Just one of the best linemen from that era of the NFL.
Solid. My next lineman was Jim Lachey. I think I said his last name right.
I think it's Lachey.
Lachey. Okay, Jim Lachey. I don't even know this guy, but this is what I read about him. 1985, he was taken first round, pick 12 by the Chargers. He was actually a 3-time Pro Bowl selection, 4-time All-Pro selection. He was part of those legendary Redskins and Out Commanders, the Hogs lineup, the Hogs lineman that won them Super Bowl. So he played pretty well for that team, and then he also had a brief stint with the Raiders as well. And so he seemed like he was a pretty good offensive lineman. He won a Super Bowl, and so I decided to take him here.
I did not remember him either. I'm not gonna.
Yeah. There was another guy I thought about here.
You should just pick guys that you remember.
Yeah, maybe I should have done that. I was like, oh, maybe I'll take what was his name? He was a Raiders guy, Steve Wisniewski. There we go.
I'm pretty sure he got drafted earlier than that. I think he was drafted.
Oh, was he? Did you swoop him up?
Oh man, I should have.
No, he was. I was like, oh, Khaled didn't take him, but I was like, I already took a center. I was like, do I want to go with the guard? But I went with the tackle. You missed him. I was surprised Khaled left him on the board.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to take him over Randall McDaniel, but dang, I should have took him with my tackle. I guess it's maybe too late now. I apologize to all my fellow Raiders fans on behalf of this because of this oversight. But yeah, the other offensive lineman I took, I should have taken Steve Wisniewski. I thought he was drafted a little later, but that's my bad. Anyway, so the guy I took was Lomas Brown. He played for the Detroit Lions. He was drafted in 1985, 6th overall. Super long career, just like Randall McDaniel. He played for he also won a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers, but he wasn't really a starter at that point. But he was a first-team All-Pro, 4-time second-team All-Pro, Pro Bowler, 7 times All-Rookie team. He's on the Detroit Lions all-time team, and he played 18 years. And in 15 of those years, he played at least 13 games, so super durable guy. And now I'm embarrassed that I didn't take Steve Wisniewski over him, but it's all good.
Maybe I should have taken him. I was like, oh, maybe Khaled. I was like, what's wrong with this guy? Why didn't Khaled take him as a Raider fan? And I was like, whatever, I'll just go with Jim Lachey.
I goofed.
But yeah, moving on to defensive lineman Khaled, I took Michael Dean Perry. He was drafted in 1988 and round 2, pick 50 by the Cleveland Browns. He's a 6-time Pro Bowl selection. He's a 5-time All-Pro. He has 145th in career sacks with 61, and he played for the Browns, Broncos, and Chiefs. Another interesting thing about him, McDonald's named a sandwich in his honor. They called it the MDP, and it was only available in the Cleveland area. So that's another interesting fact about this guy. But by all accounts, he was a dominant offensive lineman. Name sounds decently familiar. That's why I went with him.
I respect it. So the guy I took as from my interior defensive lineman is Ray Childress. So he was drafted in 1985, 3rd overall by the then Houston Oilers. 5-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro across both first and second team. He only missed 6 games in a 10-year career. Just another guy that's, a solid player, nothing spectacular. There was one year where he was in the Defensive Player of the Year mix, but, the All-Pro stuff, I wouldn't say nothing spectacular because it's hard to be an All-Pro. It's hard to be his first and second team All-Pro, so shout out to him for that. And he did have one double-digit sack season, but he was really consistent from 1988 to 1993. He had at least 8 sacks, which is impressive for a guy that's playing a little bit of a mix of defensive end and defensive tackle. He wouldn't be like the first name off people's tongues for the defensive lineman from the 1990s, but again, based on the constraints that we have, I think he makes sense for me here. So who's your defensive end?
Yeah, I took the second best defensive end here, Chris Dolman, rest in peace. He was drafted in 1985. He went with pick number 4 to the Vikings. He had a pretty long career here. He played for the Vikings. He played for the Falcons. He played for the Niners. He's a 8-time Pro Bowl selection, 3-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro. One season he led the NFL in sacks, and he ranks 5th in career sacks at 150.5 career sacks. And so just a very dominant defensive end. I remember him pretty well from the Vikings. I remember his time pretty well on the Niners. And so he was clearly the second best guy here. Your guy was clearly number 1. So I'll let you announce your selection.
Yeah,
there.
Man. I remember Chris Dolman as well. Solid pick. So my guy, I picked Bruce Smith, the obvious pick, picked in 1985, first overall by the Buffalo Bills out of Virginia Tech. And he's the Jerry Rice of defensive ends. It's incredible how good he was and how long he was one of the best defensive ends in the NFL. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 1990, 1996. So that's 11 years after he got drafted. 8-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro, 11-time Pro Bowler. He's just like Jerry Rice. He's in the 1980s and 1990s All-Decade team. He's on the NFL 100th anniversary all-time team. He is first all-time in sacks with 200. He has 43 forced fumbles, which is 15th all-time. He has 1,075 tackles, which is insane for a defensive end. It's not something that you see much. And again, just what was I didn't realize that he played for this long. It's like he played.
Yeah, he had a good career.
Yeah, he played 15 years with the Buffalo Bills, obviously. And then he had a 4-year stint with Washington where he was still pretty good. He played there from age 37 to age 40. He had 29 sacks in 4 seasons, which is incredible, again, for a guy his age, and just one of the most durable players. You look at his Football Reference page, it's like 16 games, 12 games, 16, 15. He had one injury in 1991, and it's like 15, 16. Like, just incredible. And the amount of accolades that he got. Again, he was Defensive Player of the Year twice, but he got votes for it at least 8 years out of his career. So just an incredible player. And I think he's one of the, I don't want to say he's underrated, but I think people don't talk about him enough. When they talk about the great defensive ends of all time, I don't think he gets enough credit. Maybe just because he was a little undersized. I don't even know if he was undersized. Maybe it was his number because he wore 78, which is a I think it's because he was so consistent and so good for so long. People just forget that he was just like consistent every year. He's playing 16 games. He's getting double-digit sacks. He was just that good. And people forget that. People remember the more flashy guys, right? The Michael Strahans and the Julius Peppers, the guys who put up big sack numbers, versus Bruce Smith, who was always consistently, getting you 12, 13 sacks a season. So at least. Yeah. And
at least, right.
From 1986 to 2000, so that's 15 years, aside from the one season where he only played 5 games because of injury, he had at least 10 sacks a season, which is just an insane
impressive.
level.
That's so impressive.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't have the 22 sack season, but he had a 19 sack season in 1990. And yeah, just a level of consistency that, again, you only see from the guys like Jerry Rice, and the fact that he played this position at this level for so long is, again, I don't think he gets enough credit. I think part of it, again, is just the number he wore, because 78, just, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
It's
a
like,
weird number for a defensive end for sure.
yeah, like that's like backup offensive tackle number. It's not, Hall of Fame, all world defensive end number. Maybe if you wore like, 90 or 99, he would be remembered a little bit more fondly. So I'll pass it to you for your linebacker.
Yeah, the linebacker I went with after you took the two best linebackers out of this class, I went with Kevin Green. He was drafted in 1985. He was selected in the 5th round with pick 133 by the LA Rams. He played for quite a few teams. He played with the Rams. He played with the Steelers. He played with the Panthers. He played with the Niners. All had really good seasons for all those teams. He was a 5-time All-Pro, 2-time first-team All-Pro, 1-time second-team All-Pro. 1 time he led the NFL in sacks. He's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. He's 3rd in career sacks with 160. So this is just a guy who could really get to the quarterback, and I remember him from all these teams. He played well on the Rams. He played well on the Steelers. I remember him on the Panthers. I remember him on the Niners. So just a guy that could dominate and get to the quarterback, and that's as his career sack show. That's what he did.
You said I took the 2 best linebackers, but I was being generous. I thought, by leaving you Green, because, obviously I like my guys, but he's a Hall of Famer, and my 2 guys, one of my guys is a Hall of Famer, but so I thought fair. I was being nice.
That's fair. I mean, I thought Hardy Nickerson was the better overall linebacker, but Green has the sack numbers to put him in the Hall of Fame for sure.
Bro, spoiler alert. I'm kidding.
My bad. Go ahead.
So my first linebacker is Derek Thomas. May he rest in peace. He was drafted 4th overall by the Chiefs in 1989. And he is a Hall of Famer, but he was putting together an incredible career that unfortunately was cut short by tragedy. He got into a car accident in a snowstorm, I believe, when he was 32. So he still had some years left of his prime, and he was just coming off a good season. So Derek Thomas, 9-time All-Pro, 3-time first-team All-Pro, 1990s All-Decade Team, already in the Hall of Fame, obviously. 18th all-time in sacks, and he had 20 sacks in a single season, and that was in his second year in the NFL in 1990. He never won Defensive Player of the Year, but he was Defensive Rookie of the Year, and he was second in the Defensive Player of the Year in 1990, probably second to Bruce Smith that year. So an all-time great player. And again, unfortunately, his career was cut short by tragedy. So I'll pass it back to you for your second linebacker.
Yeah. I think also Derek Thomas holds the single game record for most sacks in a game. I think he has that record, or he's tied for that record with like 5.
Was it 6 sacks?
I think 5 or 6. Yeah, he had 5 or 6 in a game.
Because I know Khalil Mack has 5, or he got 5 against.
I think him and Derek Thomas are tied for the record at 5. I think
I'm going to look into that.
I could be wrong.
But I know Mack had 5 against the Broncos and Brock Osweiler at some point.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. My next linebacker, I took Pat Swilling. He was drafted in 1986, round 3, pick 60 by the Saints. He played for the Saints for about 6 years, then the Lions, and then ended his career there with the Raiders. He was a 5-time Pro Bowl selection, 1-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time second-team All-Pro. He also 1 time led the NFL in sacks. He was also Defensive Player of the Year in 1991, and he finished his career ranked 64th in sacks with about 107.5 sacks there. So another linebacker who could get to the quarterback. He played just almost 9 years or so in the NFL, but he had a pretty decent prime there with the Saints, and he was another guy who could get to the quarterback, and he won Defensive Player of the Year in 1991, which I did not know until I researched this. So it was surprising to me.
Yeah, and in an era with guys that we mentioned and some other guys that we'll get to, it is impressive that he was able to do that. He did that off the back of 17 sacks. He had an interception. He had a pick 6. So a guy that could do it all. And if you can get to the quarterback, that's the most important thing. So, yeah, again, I thought I was being nice. He still ended up with some good players. So the guy I ended up with was Hardy Nickerson. He was drafted in 1989 in the 5th round by the Steelers, pick 122. So great value for what they got out of him. That's the Steelers. That's two things they can do is draft linebackers and draft receivers. He had 21 career sacks, 9 forced fumbles. So not a pass rushing linebacker like some of these other guys. He's more of a traditional linebacker and just a great player for a long time. He had a stint with the Steelers, but he really hit his stride with Tampa Bay as his second team, where he was in the Defensive Player of the Year mix, in the All-Pro mix. And then he had a couple years at the end of his career with Jacksonville and Green Bay. But it's a constant theme that we see with these really, really great players where they play for a long time. Obviously, some guys, their careers get short or get cut short because of injury or whatever. But we're seeing with a lot of guys on this list, they're playing for 15 years or more. Again, just because of how great they are. And even if they hang on for a year or two too long, they're still productive players at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Yeah. I remember Hardy Nickerson from his Buccaneer days. So, good pick there.
Got a great name, too.
Well,
great name.
Yeah, great name. I would say the pickings are pretty slim here at cornerback.
I was nice again.
I took you were nice. You left me some solid guys. The first guy I took here was Eric Allen. He was drafted in 1998 in round 2, pick 30. He played for the Eagles. He played for the Saints. He also played a little bit for the Raiders here. Career accolades. It was a 6-time Pro Bowl selection, 3-time first team All-Pro, 1-time second team All-Pro, and he led the NFL in interceptions one season. And he ranks career-wise 21st in career interceptions with 54, and second in career interception return yards, which is kind of surprising. But a good, solid cornerback, had a pretty good career there, and so I took him here.
I was definitely being nice because he should have been the second cornerback I picked, but I was like, let me
Absolutely, he should have been the second guy. And the guy you picked was interesting, so I'll let you get to him.
Yeah. But for now, so the obvious pick, the Jerry Rice of cornerbacks, is a theme here, and that is Deion Sanders. So he's drafted in 1989, 5th overall by the Falcons, an incredibly long list of career accolades, 8-time Pro Bowl, 6-time first team All-Pro, second team All-Pro twice as well. He won Defensive Player of the Year in 1994. He is a 3-time Super Bowl champion, obviously already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's 24th all-time in interceptions. He probably would have gotten a lot more but teams were just so scared of him as a shutdown corner. But he is second all-time in pick sixes to another guy on this list. So just one of the best athletes we've ever seen in American sports history. He had that, moonlighting phase where he was playing baseball at the same time. He retired for 3 years after he played 1 year with Washington in 2000. He retired for 3 years, and then he came back at age 37 with the Baltimore Ravens, and he played a total of 25 games for them. Didn't start a lot, but he still had 5 interceptions at age 37 and age 38. One of the best athletes again of all time. I think he ran like a 4.21 or something like that. And that was obviously before laser timing, but just an incredible player, one of the biggest personalities in the history of the NFL, and a no-brainer pick. Again, another drop-dead no-brainer.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And he played some wide receiver from time to time. I remember that he would line up at wide receiver a couple of times.
That's another. I remembered him doing that. I thought it was more of like a gimmicky thing, but there was 1 year in Dallas where he put up pretty decent numbers, 36 catches for 475 yards, only 1 touchdown, but he's like a legitimate weapon. And of course, kick and punt returns. He had 6 return touchdowns over the course of his career, was one of the most dangerous. He had 6 punt return touchdowns and 3 kick return touchdowns. And again, just goes to show you the type of athlete he was. And then obviously he applied those same return skills as a defensive player with all those pick sixes that he had. So,
and he was famous for that high stepping into the end zone, right? You remember that? He made that famous.
Oh yeah, of course. Neon Deion, great nickname. Prime time. He just
prime time.
Coach Prime.
He goes by now. Coach Prime. He goes by Coach Prime now. My goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll see how he does in Colorado, but he revitalized that Jackson State program, and I'll be rooting for him
For sure.
to see
Yeah.
what he does in Colorado.
Exactly. All right. The second guy I took here at college was James Hasty. He was drafted in 1988, round 3, pick 74 by the Jets. He played for the Jets. He played for the Chiefs. He was also played for the Raiders at some point. I don't know why this is a theme. Like guys at the tail end of their career end up on the Raiders for some reason in
It's
this
not for
draft
some
class.
reason. I have 2 words for you.
It's Al Davis. Al Davis.
He
Yeah.
loved signing dudes at the end of their career, and sometimes it would work out. If you look, I mean,
Yeah.
even guys like Eric Dickerson, Ronnie Lott, he loved.
Yeah. He loved them.
You know, he never shied away from talent despite the age, and sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. There's another guy on this list who's on my team that he had a great end of his career with the Raiders. So yeah, Al Davis is the only reason.
We'll get to that guy. So James Hasty, he was a one-time Pro Bowl selection, one-time first-team All-Pro, two-time second-team All-Pro, and ranks 104th in career interceptions at 39. So just a decent cornerback from this era that could get you some interceptions. Just overall, just decent player. I wouldn't say anything special about him, but just good, a very good, solid cornerback.
He's another guy that played for a long time. So that matters, the longevity, right? If you're playing, especially cornerback, until your mid to late 30s, not a long list of guys that can do that. Even like in this era, I think it's like Patrick Peterson, like Xavier Rhodes, maybe they're the only guys that are still doing that.
Yeah, and they're like 36, 37. Yeah, I think Peterson's like 35, and he's like considered washed up already.
And he's still doing it. So yeah, you get some credit for that. Patrick Peterson, I'm going to have to look this up because I'm curious now. He is 33, so he's not even that old.
He's only 33. My goodness. And people are acting like he's about ready to retire anytime. So
yeah. So the guy I picked is a name I think was forgotten to me, at least, but he's another guy that was on the Steelers. His name is Carnell Lake. He was drafted 34th overall by the Steelers. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro. He actually got MVP votes in 1997 and Defensive Player of the Year votes in that magical 1997 year that he had, where he played a little bit of cornerback, a little bit of strong safety. And if you look at his stats from that year, it makes sense, right? He had 3 interceptions. He had 6 sacks, which is not normal for a defensive back. And he had 70 tackles. So it makes sense that he was in the mix at that position. Again, a forgotten type player, but obviously one of the better players if he's getting MVP and Defensive Player of the Year votes in the same year. Do you remember him at all?
I actually did not remember him at all. Like, I looked him up. And I was like, "Who is Carnell Lake?" I don't remember this guy. So he was forgotten to me. So I don't even remember that 97 season, him being that dominant of a player. But I guess he was.
Yeah, and again, you got lucky. I was being nice. I left you Eric Allen.
Yeah. Eric Allen, yeah.
And he was actually he was actually a 4-time All-Pro, not a 1-time All-Pro. So that's my bad. Again, it gets mixed up based on who you ask, because there's the Associated Press and whatever. But you get what I'm saying. So I'll pass it to you for your final pick, and that is the safety position.
Yes, at safety, I took Steve Atwater. He was drafted in 1989 by the pick 20 by the Broncos. Some of his career accolades: he's a 2-time Super Bowl champ with the Broncos, 8-time Pro Bowl selection, 2-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time second-team All-Pro. He's part of the NFL 90s All-Decade team. He's in the Denver Broncos Ring of Fame. Some of his career stats: he has a 1,180 combined tackles, which is 38 all time. When you're I think he's the top safety on that list, or maybe he's like top 2 in that list in terms of safeties. Everyone else is like linebackers on that list. He's 24th in he has 24 interceptions, which is tied for 265th all time. He has 1,356 interception returns yards, which puts him 7th all time, and he has 5 interception touchdowns, which ties him for 10th all time. So overall, a very good safety. I definitely remember him from those Broncos Super Bowl runs, and he was one of those guys that they really counted on during those Super Bowl runs to anchor that defense. So and he's a Hall of Famer. So
incredible player. Somebody that I remember primarily for how physical he was as a player. He was a big hitter at that safety position, which seems to be a theme for you. You picked Troy Polamalu in our last draft, and now you're picking another.
I like I like the hard hitters, but also you took the guy I thought was the better safety. So, um, that by default I took the second best, but I definitely appreciate the hard hitters. I like the guys that lay down the wood when a wide receiver tries to come across the middle. So
yeah, and this was an era where you could still do that. So my guy, technically, he could have been a cornerback. I could have picked him at cornerback here, but I just remember him mostly as a safety because that was the tail end of his career, and that is Rod Woodson. He had a very similar career path to Charles Woodson, which I thought was funny, where he's drafted 10th overall in 1987 by the Steelers. He starts off as a cornerback, and he's lights out, right? He wins a bunch of gets named first team All Pro, gets to the Pro Bowl. He is Defensive Player of the Year in 1993, which you don't see very often from cornerbacks. Probably just a handful of guys that you see from that position. He's second runner-up runner-up Defensive Player of the Year the following year. And then he has like two other stretches in his career that were incredible, right? So he has that long stretch with Pittsburgh, and then the tail end of his career, for the last 5 years of his career, he plays 4 years with Baltimore at cornerback, and then he moves to free safety, where he rediscovers that All-Pro form. He's named to the All-Pro team with Baltimore. And then at age 37, he joins the Raiders. Again, another old guy. But this time it worked out really well because he was on that Super Bowl team, or that Super Bowl runner-up team, and he's first team All-Pro at free safety, and he has an incredible 8 interceptions, which is the tied for the most in his career. And the list of accolades continue, right? Third all-time in interceptions, first all-time in interception yards. So he was obviously a great return guy, and he has 12 pick sixes. So that's first all-time. So he's not a guy that had much production on offense, if at all, but he was a great return man. Just like Deion Sanders, he had 4 return touchdowns in his career as punt and kick returns, but he stopped doing that obviously when he got old, which makes sense, right? So I think you would have picked him over Steve Atwater, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, I would have. He had pretty good years at safety for the Ravens and the Raiders. I remember I was at Great America one year, and Rod Woodson showed up, and they let him like cut all the lines and get ahead of people, and so people were like, "Who's this guy?" And then me and my buddy were like, "Oh, that's Rod Woodson," and he was like there with his kids and stuff. So I remember that. So
yeah, I would have.
But overall good player. I would be like, okay. I was like, okay, that's cool. I was like, that's cool. It's Rod Woodson. He can cut in front of us. That's fine.
Yeah,
they were giving him special treatment there.
So, yeah, that's it for our teams. We can do a quick recap, but before we do that, there was one guy where we probably should have found a spot for him. I'm surprised you didn't pick him for one of your linebacker spots or one of your defensive lineman spots, maybe because you already picked a DN, and that was Charles Haley. Did you just forget about him? Or did you?
No, I didn't forget about him, but I considered him more of a defensive end than a linebacker. Because I think he primarily played DN. And so between him and Chris Dolman, I was going to go Chris Dolman. But Charles Haley was definitely, maybe I should have taken it a D tackle. But he wasn't really a D tackle.
Yeah, he played 1 year D tackle. I mean, I'm looking at his Pro Football Hall of Fame. I mean, I think he's maybe more of a 3-4 linebacker, but he's listed as a linebacker for the first 6 years of his career.
Oh, really? Okay.
So maybe we goofed.
And then he switched to D. I remember him more at DN because that's when he came to the Niners. He was playing DN and all that stuff.
So he was listed as a linebacker with the Niners and then a DN with the Cowboys. Yeah.
Cowboys. Sorry. Cowboys is where you
had it backwards, yeah. But I think we goofed, man. He's a 5-time Super Bowl champ.
Yeah, he is, but he doesn't. I would still go Chris Dolman and Bruce Smith over him. So
Chris Dolman, Bruce Smith, yeah. In terms of statistical, accomplishments, yeah. I heard he was insane. He did some wild stuff. He loved to expose himself in the locker rooms. So he's if you read Boys Will Be Boys, he was one of those guys, one of those main characters, and he's a real wild card in the locker room. And again, just loved to expose himself. For some reason in the Cowboys locker room. Maybe it's just a culture. But yeah, so go ahead and recap your team and I'll go ahead and do mine.
Okay. I went quarterback, Troy Aikman. Wide receivers, Michael Irvin, Andre Reed. Running back, Thurman Thomas. Tight end, Brent Jones. Flex position, Andre Rison. Offensive lineman, Dermonte Dawson. Offensive lineman, Jim Lachey. Defensive lineman, Michael Dean Perry. Defensive end, Chris Dolman. Linebackers, Kevin Green, Pat Swilling. Cornerbacks, Eric Allen, James Hasty. And then safety, Steve Atwater.
Incredible team. Even though you picked second, I still give you daps.
Yeah, I was surprised at how well the team came out. I mean, it's pretty hard to find 5 years where you're going to get 4 Hall of Fame wide receivers, right? So I think that helped, and 2 Hall of Fame running backs. So that definitely helps, and a couple of one Hall of Fame quarterback. So when you got that much talent at the skill positions, it definitely makes your team better for sure.
For sure, and we'll have to see. I think. So this era, well, let me recap my team. So I'll start. So quarterback, Randall Cunningham. My receivers are Jerry Rice and Tim Brown. Running back is Barry Sanders. Tight end is Jay Novacek. My flex was Sterling Sharp, who played wide receiver. My linemen were Randall McDaniel and Lomas Brown. My defensive linemen were Ray Childress and Bruce Smith. I probably should have picked Charles Haley as my defensive tackle. /D.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I was thinking. Should have gone Charles Haley at defensive
We'll cheat
tackle.
a little bit. I know I love Steve Wisniewski. Maybe I should have picked him as my second offensive lineman, but we're being a little more rigid with positions than I thought we would be. So maybe for the next the next couple ones we can mix that up. But my other defensive end was Bruce Smith. My 2 linebackers were Derek Thomas and Hardy Nickerson. My corners were Deion Sanders and Carnell Lake. And my safety was Rod Woodson. So I think this era, this draft class is probably the first ones that we really remember, like at the tail, maybe not the tail ends, but like the primes of their careers.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. I remember a lot of these guys as primes, right? Jerry Rice, Michael Irvin, Andre Reed, Thurman Thomas, Barry Sanders, right? You Tim Brown. Those guys you remember for sure. You remember their primes. Mm-hmm. And I think these are the guys that kind of got us into football, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. So I think in terms of going back further, maybe we do one more draft or one more half-decade team from 1980 to 1984, just so we can respect the history. I don't know how much further back you want to go.
Let's not go past back the 80s. Maybe we could squeeze in the late 70s. Maybe a late 70s. Maybe,
you know what?
Maybe.
This is a history podcast, a sports history podcast. I think we would be remiss to not acknowledge the history. I mean, don't you want to debate like Ken Stabler versus I don't know, Terry Bradshaw or something like that? We can get real detailed with it. It won't be like I remember Ken Stabler throwing 3 touchdowns in the AFL championship or whatever. But we can still enjoy some of the history. Maybe I'll invite.
For sure, we'll do it.
Maybe we can do it with some of the old heads. Maybe Ronnie, if he's down, I'll reach out to him. A couple of guys.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, we'll definitely do the 05 to 2000 or 06 to 10, and then so on and so forth. Because I think especially the 2010 to 2015, obviously a lot of guys are still active, but some of them are not. So that could be a fun little draft. But once again, thank you guys for checking us out. Thank you, Sulman, for doing this with me. Make sure to check us out on all the major podcasting platforms. Make sure to follow and subscribe and leave us a review and all that good stuff. You can find us on all the major social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, etc. at 4040 Vision Pod. Thank you guys again. Peace out.